Good evening, everyone. I'm Rose. I'm the CEO of the United Synagogue. I'm very pleased to see so many people here for our event, which is done in collaboration with our friends at the S&P. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Mill Hill Shore. The United Synagogue serves the British Jewish community in the broadest possible way through our 56 communities, through our communal and religious infrastructure, and through our programming. If you are a Jew in the UK, whether you're a member or not, whether you are Orthodox or not, you will encounter and you'll be supported by the United Synagogue multiple times over your life. I'd just like to take a moment, because I think there might be some people in the room who've contributed, to thank those who've made a donation to our Chesed appeal. We've been running appeal for our broad-ranging Chesed work over the last 3 days. I think, I haven't checked in the last 10 minutes, but I think we're at about £550,000. Wow. Thank you. And that's been achieved. By many contributions across
2,825 contributions, 2,825 donors. Amazing.
Incredibly proud that this will enable us to support the vulnerable people both within the community and beyond. We see the Board of Deputies as a critical communal partner, and I have to say that in the last few weeks I've been spending time with the Board of Deputies professionals thinking about how we can achieve more together. But tonight is all about the presidency, and so I will hand over to our president, who is going to chair this evening's hustings. So, Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening and welcome, everyone. I know there's a few people who will be coming in a few minutes late who've come from the vigil, and good evening, Judy. Tonight, we'll hear from the candidates for President of the Board of Deputies of British Jews ahead of the election in May. I want to pay tribute to the outgoing President, Marie van der Zyl, for all that she has achieved over the last 6 years. And I'm absolutely sure that she's looking forward to some deserved time off. It's a busy time for elections. Later this month, we'll see a 6-week-long election extravaganza begin in India. We're going to see the repeat performance of Biden against Trump. And of course, next month, we are going to see a new president of the board. I know deputies have a reputation for not giving candidates an easy ride, although if I can offer some words of comfort, having been through an election process for the president of the United Synagogue, I'm sure it's no worse than that. So joking aside, I really want tonight's debate to be conducted in the spirit of kindness, and while we will not be afraid to challenge the candidates, I hope that we will all do so with a healthy dose of derech eretz respect. Coincidentally, Joe's talked about our campaign, and thank you for everyone that has contributed. If you do get a little bored this evening and you're not interested in the goals that Harry Kane is going to score against Arsenal, then you can always go on your phone if you haven't done so already and contribute to our campaign. But let me walk through this evening's format. We'll begin by hearing short speeches, uninterrupted, from each of our candidates. They have up to 3 minutes each to use, and we are monitoring that. And there'll be bonus points for candidates who don't take up all of those 3 minutes. After each candidate has spoken, we will put questions to them. I have got some questions which we have previously collated, and then we will open it up to the audience. So the candidates have drawn lots. Richard Verber, who has been arranging this evening, dealt with the lots just before, and I can please invite Amanda to speak first. Your 3 minutes will start when you begin speaking. Thank you, Amanda.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Yes? Speak up. Speak up. Speak up? Okay. Okay. I'm Amanda Bowman, and I want to be your president and build a better, brighter, bolder board, a stronger, more united community that celebrates and supports our rich diversity and heritage. Over the last 6 years as your Vice President, I've been honoured to serve you, earning your trust and securing the welfare of our community. As your President, our Board of Deputies will tackle immediate threats head-on and will empower both deputies and communities to shape a vibrant Jewish life in the UK. At a time when the risks to social cohesion are so great, and when events in Israel and Gaza feed polarisation here, I'll continue to protect the freedoms, rights and security of British Jews, whether that's by advocating with government for prescription of international terror groups, or by working with and challenging the police and the CPS to arrest and prosecute those committing hate crimes. 6 months on from the heinous acts in Israel on 7th of October, we've witnessed a surge of anti-Jewish hate here in the UK, with social media spilling vile and misinformation, surveys and polls spouting figures that add to our anxiety, and pro-Palestinian marches every weekend, where the rhetoric is becoming ever more toxic. While the temptation may be to hunker down, I want us to live the board's mission to be the voice of British Jews, to look outwards beyond our community, to be active allies and build bridges among faith groups, across our communal organisations, and of course with all our deputies, young and old, left and right, of all denominations, to deliver our work strategically in a spirit of openness, transparency and respect. There are many different ways to lead, and my approach is one of collaboration. My presidency will be marked by inclusivity and empowerment. I'll create a space where every deputy has a voice, where diverse opinions are respected, and where collaboration thrives. Every deputy will tell us what they bring to the board, what they care about, and how they want to be involved. When each of us brings unique perspectives to the table, our diversity will become our strength. And as I've engaged with deputies with everything I've done so far, I'll continue to do so. The United Synagogue talks of more Jews doing more Jewish things more of the time, with a vision of a community of inspired Jews with enriched lives, passing on our heritage to future generations. As a proud US member, that's why our goals are so aligned. When I ask you to back me for a better board, build a future where our Jewish identity flourishes, where we make our voices heard, and where our community stands proud and strong. Thank you.
Thank you. Samantha, our second candidate is Sheila.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sheila Gwal, and I'm proud to be standing for President of the Board of Deputies of British Jews. I have been a Vice President, a Senior Vice President, and now I chair the Board's Outreach Education Working Group. For over 40 years in a personal capacity, I have gone all over the UK, speaking to thousands of non-Jewish school children about what it means to be Jewish, our beliefs, our practices and our culture, to help dispel the myths and misconceptions that can lead to Jewish race hate. A few weeks ago, I was in Hockley in East Essex. I ran an assembly for 400 children about Jewish culture, Jewish beliefs. It was very successful. At the end, a young boy came up to me very shyly. "Hello, miss. My name's Daniel. My teacher says I can tell you I'm a quarter Jewish." "Wow, Daniel, that's wonderful. Which quarter?" "My mum and my grandma." "Daniel, that's fantastic. How does that make you feel?" "Very proud. But I have to tell you, miss, when we go to London, my mum tells me I mustn't tell people I'm Jewish because there'll be trouble." I could have cried, and it has to stop. As president, I will have 3 priorities. First of all, we stand up against the hate marches that are going on all over the UK every week. We challenge the lies and the biased reporting that we see and hear every day on the TV and read in the papers. We need to shout louder than our enemies. What are we frightened of? Who are we frightened of? Secondly, social media, the conspiracy theories, the hate that is spewed out every day on TikTok and Instagram. young people are exposed to this every day, all day, and it needs to stop. We have deputies with the skills to tackle this. We need to come together to tackle these terrible things that we can hear all the time. And thirdly, education, my forte. Education. We need to educate about being Jewish. We need to educate about Israel. I have taken the Jewish Living Experience exhibition all over the UK, and we've expanded this to children, and we need to go beyond children. We need to go to the police, the NHS, the public service employees, and all the community, so they understand about who we are. We need to challenge the ignorance that's out there. So I reiterate, I would have 3 priorities: to stand up against the hate marches, to challenge the lies and conspiracy theories on social media, and to educate about being Jewish in this country. We need to be loud and proud about being Jews, and together we can do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Next up is Michael Goldstein.
Good evening, deputies, ladies and gentlemen. I have visited over 200 schools in the last year. The message is always the same. What are we doing about the appalling rise in anti-Semitism? This is the single most frightening challenge we face, the continued attempt by Jew haters to disrupt our daily activities. All we want is to flourish, to contribute, and to play our part in civil society. The second issue that we must not forget is that the cost of living crisis has hit our community hard, and our charities are struggling to cope. This is the time for outstanding, experienced, and real leadership. This is a serious election for a serious time. This is not a competition for who is better on TV or who's good on TikTok. We need a united leadership team to take immediate action. My style is to listen, embrace, and lead from the front and involve more deputies. On the first day of my presidency, we will form the President's Advisory Group to allow us to bring in deputies and expertise and leaders in law, politics, and media, a Cobra crisis planning group. Our community must never again be caught unprepared. Together with the Defence Division, we'll be responsible for taking up the fight against anti-Semitism and coordinating it across all deputies and the community. And a media response group. I want the best, most eloquent, and most highly trained spokespeople to represent us. I've engaged with major names in the community who will work with us and with deputies across the community. This is not about me. This is about our community to enable, to deliver, and to take action. All the organisations are working hard, but as a community, we must scale up and make a paradigm shift from where we are today. We need a properly organised and task our deputies and volunteers. We will form a united front, partnering with the best. We need an inclusive anti-Semitism programme to cover every aspect of life, and I have a plan in place with people to manage it. Now is the time to lead. We will ensure there is a balance across the spectrum of views. Younger deputies and regional deputies will play their part in these new activities. With your support as president, I can lead a team that will harness the energy of our deputies, defend our rights to live peacefully, and push back against the worrying levels of Jew hatred. Thank you.
Last but no means least, Bill Rosenberg.
Thank you very much, Michael. Good evening all. I'm Phil Rosenberg. We've been out and around the country, and this joint hustings between the United Synagogue and the S&P Sephardi community feels like a homecoming. In fact, a quadruple homecoming. Because when I was born, my parents were members of this synagogue. I represent one of the fastest growing United Synagogues, Bronsbury Park. I was Hatan Bereshit at Bevis Marks. And with my mother's Indian Iraqi family, I believe that if elected, I'd be the first ever Mizrahi, or part Mizrahi, a president of the Board of Deputies. Friends, we faced an unprecedented challenge. The massive rise in anti-Semitism against the backdrop of Israel's war of defense against Hamas is really a huge challenge for us all. And I'm an experienced campaigner who directed the board's campaign against anti-Semitism in Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. And I have the strongest plan, you can read about it here, to fight back. First of all, I'll launch a commission on anti-Semitism backed up by a campaign of advocacy that will do three main things. It will review all hate crime legislation, policing and prosecution to make sure we have the strongest protections in place. It will have a review and tackle the bias in institutions like the BBC, universities, trade unions, professional bodies, and sporting institutions to make sure that Jew hatred is not found in our civic society. And third, it will launch a program of education, training, and outreach to make sure we inoculate the society against the virus that is anti-Semitism. And we must stand up for Israel. 6 months on from the horrendous Hamas attacks, we need to do all that we can. I was proud to propose to the board the Adopt a Hostage scheme that so many of our communities have taken on, and I will campaign every day until every single one of those hostages is released. I was proud to campaign successfully for the prescription of Hamas and Hezbollah, which means that their flags are no longer allowed on our streets. Imagine if they were allowed today. And if elected, I will campaign for the prescription of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And also, I will build bridges of peace. This evening, I've exchanged Eid greetings with the ambassadors of all three of the Abraham Accord countries, and I'll work to expand the circle of peace. Friends, it is a challenging time, but we must not let negativity hold us back. If elected, I will launch a campaign to celebrate Jewish culture and heritage across the country, including 200 copies of the board's Travelling Jewish Living Experience exhibition, so we can educate against hate and build bridges of understanding. I will also invite schools to join the Board of Deputies to make sure this important part of our communities there and build a pipeline of leadership from sixth formers to youth movements to UJS and to young professionals as well to ensure continuity in our community. And I'll launch a commission on disability inclusion in the Jewish community to make sure that every part of our community is represented. Friends, we face an unprecedented challenge, as I say, but I believe that with the right leadership, our best days lie ahead. And so I ask for your vote on the 12th of May. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you. So we've received a number of questions to put to all the candidates. I'll begin by reading out some of those questions. And in fact, last night we had a meeting of quite a number of the chairs of our synagogues, and I asked them as well in terms of to give them a feel to the sorts of things that we should be asking this evening. So I'll be reading out some of the questions that we have received before inviting anyone this evening to ask a question. So question number one, and Sheila, I'll ask you to ask this first. What do you think are the strongest parts of the other candidates' campaign?
I was asked this last time, and I was asked about Simon Hochhauser. I told him he had a nice tie. Right, so.
Classic.
All of them? Or, I mean, sorry.
Just the other, however you choose to interpret the question.
Okay, so we all respect each other. I think respect is the single biggest thing I think we have. We're very supportive of each other, and as much as we know there are things that we don't have the same approach at, but we are all coming from the same place. We want to lead the board, but we do have different experiences of being on the board, and that will manifest itself as we speak. But I think generally, everyone will agree we're having so far a good campaign. We're still upright, vertical and breathing, so that's a good sign. Thank you.
Phil?
Thank you very much. Well, look, it's an embarrassment of riches, isn't it? I mean, I think I like all of these people a great deal, and I think all of them represent strong attributes. I'd say, Sheila, you represent change, and I think we need change. I think Amanda's represents competence, and I think we need competence, and I think Michael represents experience, and I think we need experience. But if you want all three of those things, change, competence, and experience, you might do well to vote for me.
Yeah, and but it'd be helpful if you answered the question.
That was the answer.
It was the other people's, very clearly other people's campaigns.
That's fair enough. I didn't say that.
Then you spoke about yourself.
Okay, so chatting with one of our deputies when we were in Leeds, I was told they wished that we could all be president because we all had things that they liked, and it was going to be a very difficult decision. I admire Sheila's tenacity. I admire the fact that for 40 years she's been going up and down the country educating young people about Judaism, and that's a really strong thing. It's her passion, and it comes over in everything she says. I admire the fact that Phil has loads of ideas. I love the ideas. I just wish I knew how he was going to put them into practice. And I've worked with Michael for the last 18 months. And so I know that Michael has a real sense of the community. He's been up and down the country and into shuls. And so he understands the shuls and what deputies are looking for. And he has enormous experience within the community. So we, as others have said, it's an embarrassment of riches.
Thank
Thank you, Amanda. I think work ethic of Sheila is outstanding. Amanda, I've admired how she conducts herself at the meetings and what she's done and the hours that she also puts in. Phil's ideas, and I loved when he joined us in the F&O team. And as everybody's just said, we've got 3 great people who will be disappointed. And I want to give a solution to that. What we should be doing is having the president's election, say May the 1st, and a month later or 6 weeks later, having the vice presidents, so that those 3 people who are disappointed would have the opportunity to stand as vice presidents. And that would obviously in due course need a change in the constitution. So it's just an idea, just a thought, and that way you can keep some of the skills that we have in the organisation.
Thank you, Mike. Keep the microphone because you're going to go next on the first one. On the next one. So the board has quite a few critics in some parts of the Jewish community. How can you as president help to improve its standing internally in our community?
You want me to go first?
Please.
I've travelled, as I've said, to 200 shuls. I've met some most fantastic deputies around the country. And this Shabbat just happened. I was in one of our shuls, synagogue shuls, and 2 key points came up: anti-Semitism and deputy involvement. And the way to try and change what's happening for the better, I believe, is to get all our deputies involved. I've been to see people, cups of coffee, they say they got elected, they went to an election to one of the divisions, 50 people got elected to the division, 60 people, and 100 people walked away disappointed 3 years ago. We should be talking to those people, involving those people, getting them in the organisation all the time. And I believe that will start to make a difference to our people and make the board a better place to be. Thank you.
Yeah, but can we just, thank you. Can we try and focus on the perception of the Board of Deputies in our community? Amanda.
Thanks, Michael. We're very lucky in the Jewish community in that we've got lots of communal organisations that are doing fantastic work. But because we're very lucky in that way, everybody feels they need to have their space, they need to be out front, they need to have their names out there. And that includes the Board of Deputies. The Jewish community expects that the board will be the voice of the British Jews. And so we need to be the voice of British Jews, but we do that by bringing everybody with us, by collaborating, by coordinating, by rarely doing things alone, but by doing things with our partners across the community. And when we do that, when it's not a competition, when we all win because we're all working together, then the board becomes a greater body, our community thrives, and we begin to see that the board's standing improves and that people want to work with us.
Thank you. Bill?
Thank you very much. Well, I think the first thing is we need to be mission focused and we need to be out there making a difference. I think one of the things that the board can do that no other organisation can do is we have 200 plus institutions, 300 plus deputies, but we don't see enough of them. We need to empower our deputies and institutions so that we see national coordination but local impact in every part of our community. And I think if people saw that, if they saw us delivering 200 Jewish living experience exhibitions in each community around the country, if they saw us delivering a parliamentary advocacy day where each of their deputies brought their communities to Parliament to speak for the cause that we believe in, then the value of the board would be very, very obvious. I would say we should try and avoid unnecessary own goals. And there have been times when we need to present a united front and we've seen division. One example is the march against anti-Semitism, where the board was not involved until very late in the day. I know a number of us were there, and it was a pity that decision couldn't have been made sooner. I think we should avoid those. We need to see unity wherever possible, and that's what I would seek to do as president.
Thank you, Sheila.
We need to gain respect on the board as the number one democratically elected 264-year-old organisation that supports and defends and advocates for the British Jewish community. Whether that's working with other organisations, yes, we should be supporting their work, but we should be leading the way and bringing them along with us. There are lots of plans, lots of marches, as Phil has alluded to, that we did not support. This needs to stop. We do need unity, but we need to regain the respect that I believe the perception of the Jewish community has been lost. And I will be the person to do that job.
Thank you, Sheila. Phil, you take the next question. The candidates will know that Bevis Marks is again under threat from a planning application for a 45-storey building 25 metres from the synagogue. If elected, what would they do to support the SNP community in the campaign to protect the UK's oldest synagogue?
Well, I take this very personally as a long-standing member of Bevis Marks, and as I said, I've had to underrate it there in the past. It is a cornerstone of our heritage, the longest-serving synagogue in our community. I used to be a local councillor, many of you will know, and I was sat on the planning committee in Camden Council for 3 years, and I'll be using all those skills to fight the corner of Bevis Marks. But actually, one doesn't need to wait. I submitted my objection last night to the planning application there, and a couple of things I said which I think are worth repeating. First of all, this is a crucial mark of heritage and the kind of society we want to be. It's a beautiful, beautiful building that was built, I believe, by a Quaker architect who waived his fee because he wanted to show interfaith solidarity. Now, that sends a really important message. The second thing I would point the developers to is the story of Babel, where the pursuit of a tall tower in a hubristic move against the divine spirit was not the right move. And I remember that we should recall that God scattered the builders across the earth. Bayaftalu did not. They ceased to build. And I think that that's a message that I would like to draw the developers' attention to.
Thank you. Amanda.
Thanks, Michael. Well, I also put in my objection. So I would lead by example, and I would encourage deputies in every way that I could to continue to fight the good fight, to support the planning objections. It's a long process, and one of the things that one needs to do is keep Bevis Marks in the public eye. And so I would look for opportunities to use the building for events that the board hosts. We were there in July 2023, and so many people found it a beautiful place to be and asked us to return. So I would look for opportunities that we could do that to keep Bevis Marks in the spotlight.
It's a very old synagogue. It's a gorgeous place. My family were members there in the 1800s, and they first came to London from Holland. And for us, the family, it's important to make sure that we keep its heritage. The Jewish community has got fantastic skills in the property industry. I know a lot of people in the property industry, and I would go use those contacts that I have got to see how they can help those at the SNP to make sure that we get the result that we want to do. Thank you.
We were privileged to have Rabbi Shalom Morris address the Community and Education Division to explain about exactly what's happening, with details of the planning process and the new application and what that would mean. And we asked him what we could do to help, and he did indeed mention this letter writing project that he wants the board support with. Look, we need to work with the SNP I'm a member of the SNP as well as other Shuls. Rabbi Morris is a close friend, well, a dear friend. And it's important that we support anything that can affect the Jewish community. So we need to be there for people. We need to be seen to be working together with other organisations, whether it's the SNP or other people who come to us for help. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Now do you take the next question? The United Synagogue makes up more than a third of the Board of Deputies budget. Should the board do more to recognise this, and how would the candidates make sure that other organisations' contribution is at the same level as the United Synagogue's is?
Thanks, Michael. So let me just repeat the question. The US brings in about a third of our budget, and what would I do to maximise that? Recognising that within the board, and also making sure that other organisations contribute. So Jo said at the outset of this meeting that she'd sat down with the professional team to look at how we could work more closely together, and that obviously is the first point to start at. We also need to see that our United Synagogue deputies are playing their full role. I think they're well represented on divisions and on working groups, and generally across the top table of the board. And so that allows us to ensure that the United Synagogue voice is being heard. But tangible things that we're doing together, we should be doing more about more in terms of capacity building, and some of the programs that we're running. We could be opening to United Synagogue members, doing more with our young people. But then the second part of your question is, how could I ensure that other organisations are contributing equally? Well, the way that we bring in money from the different synagogal movements is by synagogues joining the Board of Deputies and by their representatives that they send. So as we bring in more members from across the other denominations, we'll also have more deputies from across those organisations. And so what I would just finish off by saying is that if your shul hasn't taken up your full allocation of deputies, then please do, because as the progressive movements take up their full allocation.
I think that's a relatively minor part of the contribution. The major part of the contribution are the voluntary contributions from members. And I just want to make sure that the other organisations are proportionately contributing as we do, or our members are contributing as ours are.
Well, in terms of communal contributions, as the board delivers more for the Jewish community, the communal contributions will follow.
Thank you. Michael.
So I've been spending quite a bit of time looking and analysing the numbers and figures, and I'm going to deal with the other organisations first, and then I'll come back to the United Synagogue. Many shuls, maybe some of the United Synagogue shuls, have had no visits, and people haven't been there for 14 years in some cases. If we don't go to those shuls, they get out of the habit of understanding what the board does. So it's the responsibility of the board to go to those shuls, go to those members, go and talk to them, whenever it has to be, and persuade them that their reports of the contributions of the members of those individual shuls is absolutely vital. And obviously, it's the story of what the board is doing. As far as the United Synagogue is concerned, I have developed a good relationship with the treasurer of the United Synagogue. They have been very supportive to us, particularly with this round of the increase from £30 to £35, which has come into place now. And it's important for us to continue to go to members and persuade them that the board has a role to play and what that role is. And it's very much at the ground level of work that needs to be done that will make this work. Thank you very much.
Phil?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, the board has to give value to the United Synagogue by fighting for the causes that we both share, whether that's Torah, Avodah, Milut Chasadim. The board needs to be right at the forefront of defending the ability of everyone to lead a Jewish life, whether that's in Shechita, Mila, coronial services and so on. We need to be at the forefront of defending our religious freedom and religious values. I'm really pleased about how well Chesed has done and working together on social action and social justice, which is a crucial part of what we do. I think we also want to be supporting the future-proofing of the United Synagogue. One of the things I want to do is bring schools onto the Board of Deputies so that we create a leadership pipeline. Obviously, many of the schools in our community, United Synagogue bodies, which will increase the voice of the United Synagogue and its related membership. And also, I put myself there. You know, when people think of a member of the United Synagogue, they don't think of people who look like me. We sometimes struggle as a community to attract younger members, and I would be willing to put myself out there and say, this is what the United Synagogue member looks like, and make the case to the next generation about the importance of this amazing organisation. Of course, it's right, and you're right to say it, that other organisations pay their fair share. I chaired the Communal Contribution Task Force, which looked at a range of ways that we can up the communal contribution from all parts of our community, but also to look at fundraising by other sources. And if I'm elected, that's exactly what I'll do.
Thank you. Sheila?
Yes, we should recognise the contribution that the United Synagogue makes to the board, and I want to thank each and every United Synagogue deputy who helps with that work. But lots of deputies aren't even, lots of the community people who go to United Synagogues don't even know who their deputies are. I have personal experience of somebody asking me, you know, who is my deputy? And that's not good either. We need to have, as Phil said, value for money. We need to come, as Michael said, and speak to you. We need to have a programme, a proactive programme of visits to all synagogues, all organisations, not just the United Synagogue, not wait to be asked to go for a Shabbat, which could be quite costly and a lot of organising. We need to have all the chairs of the divisions and the president and the vice chairs on a programme going out to synagogues so they understand that we support the community from the cradle to the grave. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So we've got about 20 or so people online, as well as those in presence. So is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question? A reminder that a question is not a 3-minute speech where your voice goes up at the end. So please be short, please be sharp, and then we'll have a debate. I don't know everybody's names. It's a little bit embarrassing, but I do know George's names, and George can be first. George White. Pinner Synagogue. That's how much I know. Wow. I'll fail after that.
Obvious that it is the media that are driving anti-Semitism. I wasn't actually horrified the way the media been handling the war in Gaza for the last 6 months. That to me is a result. We did not put the work in for the last 10 years to actually make a difference. What I want to know is, given the fact that some of you have been around and been at the top table of work, what are you actually going to do to make a difference? I hear about all these great things about commissions, etc. We need to make a difference today, because in another 6 months, we will have lost the battle of the PR and that service. So I want to know what you can make as a difference, rather than commissions or whatever. It will take 6 months to a year to happen.
Okay, thanks, George. I'll ask Phil to take that one first.
Thank you very much. Good question. Look, we need to step up our game in terms of fighting back. And I'd like to set up a media rebuttal unit, pretty early days. As you say, it's an urgent thing to do. That we'll attack the problem in 3 levels. First of all, respond to stories in real time about trying to get the facts back about what's happening. We have in the past been able to change headlines. We need to do that a lot more regularly. Second of all, we need to review whole components, whether that's things like BBC Arabic or BBC Verify that have too often caused trouble. And I think we need a comprehensive review of coverage since the 7th of October to show the case for how it's gone. You know, we've spoken in the past about the Bowman report. Now, the Bowman report was more than 20 years ago. We need to produce our own report to really show and hold the BBC and others feet to the fire about the biased coverage. If we do those 3 things, we'll be in a much better place.
Sheila?
Thank you. Yeah, I hear you, George. Heard you a long time. I've not actually been in a position to do anything. I wish I could. We have the deputies with the skills. Phil's talking about setting up groups. Lots of deputies have got strategies of how we can do that, working with the board staff. But we also have to have our own messages out there. It's not just about being reactive all the time when we see these lies and this bias on the TV and frightened to turn it on. So we need to have, we've got professionals at the staff and we have deputies with the skills to be able to start talking about, while they're still in captivity, the hostages, talking about the Hamas refusing a ceasefire. These messages aren't getting across, and this is what we need to do. We have within the Jewish media here in this room who could perhaps have their voice heard and lobby the nationals and try and make our voices heard. Sorry, Simon.
Michael?
I've said consistency on the hustings that we have to deal with this and deal with this now as well. As I said, on the first day of my presidency, I will form this President's Advisory Group to allow us to bring in deputies with expertise and leaders in law, politics and media. The Corporate Crisis Group, Planning Group, is going to look at every possible area, sports, schools, universities. Our universities consistently under attack. I've been to Leeds University. I've been to see the chaplain where we saw what happened there 6-8 weeks ago, and to see what we can do to help in those universities. And the way to do it is to have work to make locally to make sure we know the key people in the universities now, and to get groups of people together to deal with the BBC and other organisations where there's consistent drop process of attacking the Jewish communities, and we need to try and push back against all of those areas. We have the deputies, we have the people with the skill sets who know how to organise it, and we need to work with other organisations in the communities and do it quickly. And that has to be our main priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Amanda?
Thanks. I don't think anyone can imagines that we've been winning the war in the media over the last 6 months. We haven't, and I completely understand, and I feel and I share your frustration that we aren't getting our messages across strongly enough. Different people have talked about different kinds of response units, and I absolutely agree that we need a specialist group of people there just working on the comms that we need to do, being proactive, working on the issues that are immediate, but also thinking to the longer terms. There are some things that we can do immediately in terms of rebuttal. There are some things we can do proactively, and we need to plan for those. And there are some things that we need to work on over the long term. Things like a review of the media bias that we need to monitor and track and measure and have the data that we can go back to the media with. It's not just the Board of Deputies and the staff and the Board of Deputies that can do this. We need to be working with experts outside the community too. And we need to be working with our communal organisations, because we all have expertise within our organisations on this. And if we are coordinated and we collaborate, we can each do what we're best at. So let's use the power that we've got.
Thank you. Hold the microphone. You can take the next one first. Gary, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. One of the candidates.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Gary Mont.
And you're here as a...
I'm a member of local United Synagogue.
Wonderful.
One of the candidates has been reported in the press as saying the board's been invisible since the 7th of October. I think that's a little unfair on the board, because the board has, to its credit, been active in supporting the campaign for the hostages' freedom, and bringing them home. However, in one area it has been very quiet, and that is in its actual support for Israel, for the Israeli government, and for its war efforts. So my question is, let's assume that you're elected president, and let's assume that after a day or two, Israel invades Rafah. And let's assume there are a lot of casualties, and a few days later, the British government, supported by the Labour opposition, imposes an arms embargo on Israel, and possibly other sanctions as well. What action are you going to take? There are three possibilities.
Okay, I think that's a question. Thank you. Amanda, I think the question is, if, God forbid, Israel invades Rafah and there is an arms embargo, which is a cross-party supported, what would you do as president of the Board of Deputies?
Well, we know that embargoes don't work. And so I would call for an immediate meeting with the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister to have a conversation about any such embargo. and explain and give that some history as to why embargoes don't work. I'm not quite sure. I mean, you know, there were lots of questions potential questions in there, but if the question is,
I try to
if
condense
the question is, what would I do immediately? I would call for a meeting with the Prime Minister and with the Foreign Secretary.
Thank you.
Do it behind the scenes. It doesn't necessarily need to be all over the newspapers.
Michael.
I believe that it would go, Amanda has answered the question to a great degree, in that obviously we have to go and see the Prime Minister, we have to go and see the Foreign Minister, we've got to go and see the leaders of all the other parties immediately, and we've got to go and seek our friends who are in the wider world, who do support Israel. We do have friends in the non-Jewish world, and I think it would be important actually to go and see some of those people as part of that. And I've actually been building a base of getting to know some of those people in the last few months. So that's where I would go, as well as the obvious political people to see.
Thank you. Bill. Thank you very much. Well, I have the strongest connections across politics, the media, faith and diplomacy, and I will make this case very loudly, not in private, loudly and in public, because I think that an arms embargo on Israel is blaming the victim. And one of the things that I've said consistently is the calls for a ceasefire. Look, all of us want a ceasefire. None of us want to see innocent people hurt. But a ceasefire can't mean Israel ceases and Hamas fires. That seems to be what a lot of people are saying. We need to push back against that narrative. There was a ceasefire on the 7th of October, which Hamas broke. There was a ceasefire after the last round of hostage releases, which Hamas broke. We've got to change the narrative. I think the other thing we need to do is draw attention to the threat posed by Iran. It drives me absolutely crazy that the media talks about the war in Gaza, talks about the war in Lebanon, the war in the Houthis, and then Iraqi Shia militias, as if these are four completely different, disjointed things. We need to point to the threat that Iran poses, not just to Israel, not just to us as British Jews, but to the UK as well. And I think if we begin to do that more cogently and coherently, we will begin to push back and begin to win this battle.
Thank you, Sheila.
Gary, what I actually said was the board's leadership has been invisible since October 7th in defending and protecting our community, if you look at my quote. And I stand by that, because we've done stuff with the vigils, we've done stuff with education advice and employers' advice. We have not been out there. We didn't organise a march against anti-Semitism. We didn't even support it. So no, we haven't done that. The leadership, the staff have been directed by the leadership who have been invisible. And we haven't done enough. The first thing I would do if Israel was under attack or embargo, I would call the Israeli ambassador and see what support they want from the Board of Deputies. That's the first thing I would do, and see what we could do to help them in that case. They have to be our first port of call in our support of Israel. We have an ambassador who lives in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, there's Carol Abraham that's got a hand up online. How can we get the question? Do I press the thing that says allow mic? Okay. Carol, can you? No, that's not going to work. Huh? Okay, let's carry on for the time being. Introduce yourself in the front row, please.
Hi, I'm Stephen. I was on the panel for the board's recent thing on disability last month. Just having a look around the room, there aren't many people under 40, and I think maybe only one under 20. I would ask everybody on this panel, is it an issue? And if it is, what are you going to do to change it, to get a more younger and mid-wage age voice into and onto the board?
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Sheila.
Thank you, Simon. So we do have a lot of active young people, as you say. We've got BBYO people. Steve, sorry.
Stephen, sorry.
That was Michael's fault.
Michael, sorry.
Yeah, you're quite right. We do have young people. We've got an under 35 forum now, and we have excellent array of skills that hopefully can help with all this tech stuff that we want to do with social media. But it's a fact that when young people grow up and meet a partner and please God get married, we have evidence of this happening with a senior vice president in this room who found that he needed his life back. We have a senior vice president now who is not standing for re-election. It's a fact that there's this gap in the middle when other things are more important, but their allegiance to the deputies never changes and people do come back. And what we have to do is value deputies of all ages and make them feel that their expertise and their skills are welcome, whoever they are and wherever they're from.
Thank you, Phil.
Well, first of all, Stephen, I watched that panel and I thought it was excellent. So thank you. It's an issue that we need to raise more about disability inclusion. As I've said, I will, partly inspired by what you were saying, launch a disability inclusion commission if elected president. There are three things that I would say in response, because you're absolutely right. We are underrepresented, those of us who are under 40. First of all, I want to model change. I mean, people need to be able to see that this is a place for them. And as president, I will model that. I'll say that this is a place for people to be valued, if they're younger in age. Second of all, I draw back to this pipeline of leadership that I want to create. If we bring in the schools, we have sixth formers, youth movements, UJS, young professionals. The board becomes a thing that no one else has, a leadership pipeline. And I think that will engender the continuity that we seek to see. And the third point is this. I think there are some structural and accessibility issues. One of the things that I'm conscious of is that if you are a parent with young children, how do you get to a board meeting? And now we do have online the option. But I'd like to pilot, and I say this in my manifesto, childcare facilities at board meetings, so that parents, particularly those who might want to come from regional communities, can know that their children will be looked after, spend the time in adult conversation and participate fully. And we should be looking at all those barriers to inclusion for different groups as well. But I think if we do that, model the change, create the pipeline, and remove barriers to accessibility, we'll engage younger people as well.
Thank you. Amanda.
Thank you. Some of you may know that in my professional life, I'm an expert in volunteering and I promote volunteering. And as part of that work, I've been part of 2 government reviews on volunteering and encouraging more volunteers. What I know from that is that middle age, that young people, when they leave university up until they're probably around 40, do not generally volunteer. But there are some really easy and good ways that we can encourage them to still be involved with the board. Episodic volunteering is what it's called. So we need to find ways that younger people can be involved with the board in a meaningful way, but not have to make a long-term commitment, as being a deputy might not be the way that they want to express their support for the board. So that's one thing. The second thing is we have a young professionals network that equally should be providing a pipeline to our deputies, and we should be encouraging more opportunities for engagement there. We have our under 35 assembly, and I would make sure that we formalise the fact that the chair of the under 35 assembly is part of the executive, bringing formally that young people's voice into our decision making, and make sure that it's more than just about decision making, it's about engaging in the way that young people want to engage in the work of the board. I'd also include much more engagement with our youth movement so that we can identify and find opportunities to do joint projects to engage young people more often and more fruitfully with the board's activities, so that when they're ready to become deputies, they know who we are, they know what we do, and they know the difference that they can make.
Thank you. Michael.
So as many of you know, I'm involved with Maccabi. It's one of the youth groups, youth organisations in the community. I've always encouraged young people. I've always worked with young people. It's been my area of expertise in terms of the zone starting in Leeds, and it's something that I really believe in. What we have to do is to get more younger people encouraged, attending the meetings, and give them something to do. One of the things that's really important is actually to have more of their own committees and dealing with people of their own age. They don't always necessarily want to sit with the older people. I found that in my synagogue. When I first joined, I was the youngest at 63. When I left, It's not funny, it was serious, you know. When I left, and I handed over, albeit the board was reduced from 28 to 12, of which 6 of the people were under the age of 45. We've made the change, and that's the sort of work that we're going to have to do. Now, one of the things that I proposed in my manifesto was to have a board awards. And one of the things that I would look to do is have those board awards weighted towards young people's operations, what they're doing, and award excellence in the community for young people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I just deal with the one question we got, which was come online, which has come from Carol Abrahams from Catford and Bromley Synagogue, United Synagogue affiliate synagogue. And the question is, how should Board of Deputies support Jewish children at non-Jewish schools, particularly in the senior years? AJ6, which was attached to Hillel and cross-communal, was great support for children moving to university. Michael, do you want to take that first?
So Jewish children in...
Jewish children at non-Jewish schools. I would ask, the first question is this a role for the Board of Deputies? That I personally, that would be mine, but I'm supposed to be an impartial chair.
There are organisations, and I just mentioned Maccabi because we do go into non-Jewish schools. We have those organisations set up across the community who are going into non-Jewish schools. And I think what we've got to do is build relationships with those organisations. And I think that partnership is really important. And when I mean by partnership, it doesn't mean that we have to have our name plastered all over the board. But what we're saying is, let's work with you. And it's something that I would encourage, and we're doing it already. So thank you.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Carol, for the question. It's actually a question that I asked myself immediately after October the 7th. And that was why the board put out an advisory for parents of kids in non-Jewish schools, because we knew from previous events that children in non-Jewish schools find themselves in very difficult situations, often having to answer questions that they don't know the answers to. Their parents are put in difficult situations at the school gates. The teachers don't know how to handle things. And so as a result of that, the board put out an advisory, and we also held an online event that thousands of parents of kids in non-Jewish schools attended. But you asked the question about what would we do for Jewish children, and Michael Goldstein suggested that it might not be the Board of Deputies' role to do anything. Actually, I think it's the Board of Deputies' role to work with the denominations and with the youth movements to make sure that that provision is provided. But also, most importantly, because I see it in our higher education working group and in working so closely with UJS over the last 6 years, that when young people get to university, whether they've been Jewish kids in non-Jewish schools or Jewish kids in Jewish schools, they meet people from a completely different range and diversity of opinion, and they're often not prepared for what they're seeing. And who knows what the next lot of kids going in will find, because our Jewish kids in universities over the last 6 months have suffered so enormously. So everything that we can do, we should do it all, and we should do it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Phil.
Well, thank you, Carol. Hello, and thank you very much for your question. I attended a not-Jewish majority, a non-Jewish school myself, so I know the issue, and I think it's a really important question. I believe UJA JAMS has a service particularly for those schools, so I wouldn't want to duplicate. I'd want to work with existing partners. But I think 3 things. First of all, resources are important. I'd agree with that. Second of all, I'd like to get the youth movements together so that we hear about those voices. Many of them are already members of the Board of Deputies, but perhaps having specific counsel for them to hear about what they're experiencing, what their members are experiencing would help us. And third of all, I suspect Sheila and I are going to agree violently on this one, is education to the schools, so that children, non-Jewish children in the schools understand Judaism, understand their neighbours, Jewish neighbours. We tackle anti-Semitism through digital and physical resources and through the best-in-class educational resources. And that way we improve the lot for Jewish students in those schools.
Thank you. Sheila.
Thank you, Phil. Yes, Phil mentioned our new online resource. I have to give a plug here. Board staff have worked amazingly well with support from the Anti-Defamation League in America, who gave us a huge grant to develop an online resource called Jewish Learning Online. It's an anti-Semitism free resource to all schools. It's going to, hopefully, it's in the final stages of being sorted, final draft. 11 to 16-year-olds will be able to have anti-Semitism education in every school. And we've got amazing representatives all over the UK who, some are deputies, some are not. It's an organisation called a SACRE, which is Standard Advisory Council for Religious Education. There are 135 Jewish representatives, but we have grown from 35. I have helped grow from 35 in the last 3 years, and these will be able to advertise this resource to all schools. So, Carol, what we need to do, Phil's quite right, educate. That's the answer to cancel the ignorance that people are subjecting Jewish children to, unfairness and the ignorance that's out there. We just really need to get out and educate everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Any other? I think we've got a question in the front here. Can you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Julie Berg, and I'm a member of Radlett United. We're living in very difficult times at the moment. This is the most difficult time, I think, in my lifetime for Jewish people in this country. And that's because of a range of issues. It's because of the rise of anti-Semitism, obviously, in this country, and because of the war in Israel with Gaza, which has, I think, caused a rise even more in that anti-Semitism, but it was there before. What I want to know is how the board is going to influence government to support the Jewish community in the ways that we think it should, and support Israel in the ways that we think it should. Going back to an earlier question, and clearly we have to do that through government, and I want to know what experience each of the candidates have, because they will be, as president, the face and voice of the Jewish community. And I want to know what experience they have of dealing with government at serious senior level in their personal careers, and how they're going to manage to do that.
Thank you. Sheila, do you want to take that first? You've got the microphone.
Thanks, Judy. Yes?
Jody.
Sorry, Jody. Yeah, my professional career, I ran a pub. So we didn't, unless we had ministers coming in, I didn't actually meet any, but I have been vice president and senior vice president. And in that capacity, the gentleman now, James Cleverly, is a Home Secretary. I met him when he was the Minister for International Development. And I actually had a long conversation with him. He was new in the job about the UNRWA funding the Palestinian textbooks that our taxpayers' money is teaching Palestinian children to, to be a martyr and kill Israeli soldiers. I have met with shadow cabinet ministers when I was as a vice president running the communities and education division. I have in the international division, not only government ministers, but ambassadors from different countries, because we need our friends across the whole range of people who can help us. Thank you.
Phil?
Well, thank you very much. Great question. So my career is in government relations. I was Director of Public Affairs at the Board of Deputies. I now work for an agency that supports companies and organisations and charities in terms of government relations. I used to also be a local councillor. I was an elected local councillor, so I know the democratic process from that side of it. And I had the strongest relations across, I commend you to have a look at this wonderful document I've produced, strong connections across all politics. I should say that in Canada particularly, I got to know one of the local MPs, a gentleman by the name of Keir Starmer, and I have good relationships across the Conservative Party as well. I think the main thing that we need to do when we're doing advocacy is look at win-wins. I think we have a lot of support across the political spectrum on principle grounds. A lot of people understand that. A lot of people are responsive to their Jewish constituents, but we need to show them that certain things are shared challenges. When I speak about the challenge of Iran, when the Houthis are bombing British ships, we need to understand that that's a shared challenge, not just for Jewish people, not just for Israel, but for this country. And I think make that understood. The second thing is we need to mobilize better. So we have 300 deputies in 200 institutions. What are we doing with them? Each and every single deputy should get to know their local MP, their local councillors, their local faith leaders, and their local media, so that every action the board takes should be pulsed out 300 times across the country. And each of those deputies should be trained to mobilise their community, so that rather than just being the board's voice, and it's important that we get that right, we're mobilising the full force of our community. Imagine 300 deputies in Parliament. Imagine they bring their rabbi, their chair, and their treasurer. That's 1,000 Jews in Parliament. Imagine they bring 10 to 20 of their members. That's suddenly a game changer, and it's the impact we need to have.
Amanda.
Thank you. I talked earlier about how I've been on 2 government reviews around volunteering, but my work across in that sector was both on a national level, but also on an international level. And so through that work, I had the opportunity to work with the leaders of government and the shadow leaders of government for 30 years as I worked in both the international and the national scene. That meant I also presented and went to and delivered sessions at the UN General Assembly and at the World Economic Forum in Davos, where I got to meet world leaders and national leaders too. So from that, I then applied that when I came into the board, and the work that I've done over the last 6 years, I've been representing you, all British Jewry, in my meetings when I meet with government ministers, whether that's junior ministers or cabinet ministers, whether I'm working with shadow ministers to talk about and to tackle and to challenge and to encourage and to influence them on the issues that matters to British Jews. I think, there isn't anyone who as a lay leader across this panel has had the opportunity to have as in-depth a way of dealing with government and local government as well, because we're dealing with local government and council chambers and councillors every day of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Going back in time, I chaired Labour Friends of Israel, albeit it was with Tony Blair when he was the Prime Minister. I came to be there because my background is business. People felt that I could bring the right skill sets, and I've obviously got to know a lot of MPs. Many of those today have retired. I have continued to keep some contacts in the Parliament with MPs, and I meet with them from time to time, and I'm able, through my other contacts, to go and see people when I've needed to do so. I think it's important going forward that our deputies across the country learn and are taught and are trained how to deal with MPs, councillors, and that's something that is very important. Going back in time, for me, I was very much involved after the race riots in Bradford. I ended up chairing the Bradford Regeneration Company, which again came on the back of my ability to get to know people quickly and learn how to deal with politicians at high level. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Introduce yourself, Vicky.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Vicky Harris. I represent Hampstead Garden Suburb Synagogue as a deputy. And I've had the privilege of knowing and working with all 4 candidates one way or the other. The Board of Deputies is on record as supporting the Holocaust Memorial in Victoria Tower Gardens. And yet, as yet, the deputies have not been consulted. Would you, as President, consult deputies and pass on to whichever government we have in place at the time the views of deputies on whether there should be a Holocaust memorial in Victoria Tower Gardens? Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Phil.
Well, thank you, Vicky. So I think this is currently under legislative process, and I agree with you that we need to consult deputies a lot better. I think that it's a challenge that we have so few votes, so few debates, so few discussions, and not only should we have them at board meetings, but we should take a snap poll, be able to take snap polls, the digital technology between meetings as well. My personal view on the Holocaust Memorial Learning Centre is that I support it. I respect that there are people that take a different view, and I'm conscious that as each time we lose a survivor, over time, this issue will lose salience, it will lose prevalence, and historical events begin to lose the support and funding over time. And I'm concerned that if we don't grab this opportunity that the government and opposition have presented us while we've got it, to have a National Holocaust Memorial Learning Centre right beside Parliament, we're not going to get this opportunity again. Funding won't exist, we won't have that opportunity. So I would urge deputies to support it. But yes, I want to see more debates and more consultation on these issues.
Sheila?
Thank you. Yeah, when you're representing an organisation, Vicky, whether you're a president or you're an honorary officer, and I've learned this because I am experienced, you don't have a personal view. Okay, it should be the consensus of the deputies, but I agree that we should have debate whether or not it can influence government, but it's important for deputies to know that their voices can be heard. And I would like regular debates with topics that have come from all 4 divisions at least once a year. Okay, so that would be alternative meetings with a debate on top, whatever. But this is really important, and there are other workings of the board that should also be debated, because deputies need to know that their voices can be heard and respected.
Thank you. Michael?
We're very proud of the board that we are the only democratic organisation, we should say regularly, and that the people there are elected by a democratic process. Therefore, it is really important that the debate takes place on key issues, and in particular the one around the Holocaust Centre in Westminster. And I would recommend that if we have to go back and re-debate it, I would bring it back to the table if that is what the majority of the people in the board would like to do.
Thank you. Amanda?
Thanks. There are 2 parts to that question. One is, would I consult? And one is, what do I think about the memorial? I think Phil's sort of answered that, in that it's sort of irrespective of what I think about the memorial, because it's currently going through process. And unless there's something to debate, I'm not sure that right now we can debate that again. However, the principle of should we be consulting is absolutely valid. And yes, of course we should. And in my manifesto, you'll have seen that I'm saying that we should be having policy dialogues in between board meetings where we discuss issues and policies that the board are focusing on. We bring in people to inform us, to brief us, so that we're up to date on issues. And then we can take votes. We can take votes at plenary, or we can take votes within those policy dialogue sessions themselves. More of them, more regularly, on more things, so that we as honorary officers know for sure what deputies believe about things.
Thank you. I think there's a question from the youngest member here this evening. So introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Noah. I'm 19 and I'm Vice President of Bristol Jewish Society. I wanted to ask if any of you have plans to address the nuance of both the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and specific Israeli military actions. I'm a proud Zionist and a university student. And coming from campus, a place of intense polarization, back to my home in the Jewish community, almost feels like I'm on the opposite end of that spectrum. Would there be space for measured discussion and criticism to allow Jews in this country to help shape Israel into the greatest and most just state it could be?
Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Noah. It's a great question. Amanda, do you want to take that first? You've got the microphone, sorry.
I'm going to pass the microphone. Thank you, Noah. Noah, I'm so pleased that you asked that question. It was a great question, and I can only speak for myself, but I think I speak for all of us when we all say that we're proud Zionists too. But I do believe that on campus you have the opportunity to debate this in a way that is quite different from what your experience is when you come home. And so when you come home, what you're seeing is the nuance of the issue. And perhaps when you're at university, you're seeing the extremes of the issue. I think the question was, will we discuss the nuance of it and stand up for it? The Board of Deputies is there to to stand up for and the security and the standing of Israel. And so that's part of our remit. The deputies have a very diverse range of views around Israel, and particularly that's coming through at this time. We don't, as British Jews, have a vote in Israel. We can't vote. And so whether or not we agree or disagree with the way that Israel are pursuing the war, or the way Israel is acting, way the government are acting, that's not our role. We can debate it as much as we like, but actually we don't have a vote, and it's not the role of the Board of Deputies. But what I would say to you is that we are there to support the safety and security of Jewish young people on campus, and I would do, and I have done that in my conversations with vice chancellors and with provosts, and in the support that I have for the Union of Jewish Students.
Thank you, Amanda. Sheila.
Thank you, Noah. Yeah, as Amanda said, with the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and voting for the Israeli government policy and what goes on in Israel actually is for people who can vote for Israeli government policy. But I'm just up the road from Cardiff, and we've had and we've had a few issues there with the university students, and we're working with the JSOC, because you've got the Union of Jewish Students who just can support you, but there are times when they have come to the board because they need board support. And we are there for you, for the Union of Jewish Students and all the JSOCs in the country. I actually go to Loughborough University, where we support the Jewish students on peace cafes, because there are isolated Jewish students when the JSOCs are not very active. And I've actually been sitting, supporting Jewish students. And, it's very welcome. The board is there, but we can't influence Israeli government policy.
Thanks, Sheila. Phil.
Well, thank you. And no, I first of all want to thank you for your service and your leadership, because Bristol has been unfortunately the forefront of the news, particularly because of the abominable David Miller. And I know it's been a really tough time. And I thank you and everyone at the JSOC for the leadership you're showing on all of our behalf. So first of all, thank you. Thank you for that. I don't think we should be frightened about diversity or debate. I mean, I've said that we want to have more debates in board meetings, and I mean it. Why should we close down discussion? I think it's right that we hear from all sorts of different voices in our community. I think that it's absolutely right that there's disagreement, L'Shem Shamayim, right? We should be able to disagree for the sake of heaven. But what I'd also say is it's okay to agree, L'Shem Shamayim, as well. And as much as there are things that do divide us, and they do, there are things that unite us, and I spoke to that earlier. First of all, the campaign to release the hostages, I think, unites us. Second of all, the campaign to identify and tackle extremism, the sort promoted and pushed forward by Iran, the attempt to prescribe the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. All these are things I think that show us unity. I think that there's unity on the idea to promote peace and drive forward the Abraham Accords in the region. And so as much as I'll embrace debate and diversity, I'll also be looking to push forward with unity on the issues that we are united by, which is, despite all of what you might read in the media, the majority of things on Israel as well.
Thank you. Finally, Michael.
The majority of Jews, firstly, no, it's a great question. And also, I think you and your colleagues at the universities are doing a most unbelievable job, as I saw in Leeds when I went to Leeds myself a few weeks ago. Majority of Jews support Israel and are Zionists in Great Britain. We are the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and therefore we support Israel. That is number one. It is really important, that message. As far as the university students are concerned, I believe that we've got to up the story of support for the students in the universities. You guys are under attack big time, and we've got to find ways through some of my committees that I'm going to set up of giving you extra support, both financially as well as physically, in terms of helping you and giving you the plans that you need and you want. So thank you, Noah.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take one last question from Jerry Lewis from the floor.
Jerry Lewis, United Synagogue. The Jewish students
as we've just heard, have been centre of some of the most vicious anti-Semitic activity on campuses. What proposals do each of you have working to see Vice Chancellors to ensure that Jewish students are protected? And you've all spoken about Jewish unity in working with the community. How do you propose to address the difficulties recently highlighted with the child scheme? And how would you rein in groups such as CAA, who tend to cause problems in other places for our community, such as upsetting the police?
Phil.
Can you just repeat the question?
Yeah, so I think there's two questions. And the second question, the first question is how are you going to deal with, are you going to interact with university, the Vice Chancellor's university in dealing and helping the students? And the second one is, I'm not going to repeat the language that was used because I think it's not appropriate. How are you going to work more collaboratively with the other organisations?
Well, thank you, Jerry. Insightful questions as ever. So first of all, I think we've got to work with students rather than, on top of them. So whether that's with particular JSOCs, UJS, and also chaplaincy as well, and the other student organisations stand with us and others that do really, really good work across campus to know where we're going to add value and support their work rather than duplicate or get in their way. As I said earlier, I want to launch a commission back with a programme of advocacy that will look at, among other things, the challenges we see on university campuses, so we can identify the challenges and make recommendations to university sector and individual universities. And the third thing, this comes to the empowerment of deputies, which I think is really important. I want each of our 300 deputies to be getting to know local policymakers, but where they're in places where there's a university, I want them to develop relationships with the leadership of each of those universities, so that when there is ever a challenge, we've got the roots there to advocate as well, to support the students. Oh, and on the question of the other communal organisations, I would say I think it's a question that is posed in quite a divisive way. I want to focus on where we can work together rather than where we can be divided.
Sheila.
Thank you. Yeah, the answer is sitting down and talking to people, whether they're vice chancellors or leaders of other organisations. I have a doctorate in communication. I am collaborative. I can read the room. You ask the people who have sat on my working groups and my divisions. I have testimonies in my manifesto and people I've worked with. I can contact people, Jerry, sit down and have an initial conversation. Everything starts with the first sentence. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda.
Thanks, Jerry. I said earlier that I've had the opportunity to lead delegations to go and visit several vice chancellors over the last 6 years. But what I've also seen is, certainly over the last 4, is the strength of the leadership within the Union of Jewish Students, and how they have stood up and taken on that leadership role, and how they work with us to encourage us to work alongside them, where it's now often the UJS that are bringing us to those meetings. So we bring a completely different perspective, and I think we're stronger when we go in together. And so I encourage UJS to bring the Board of Deputies in more often. There's one other aspect of work that we can do with Vice Chancellors, which is that what we've been seeing on campus increasingly is universities challenging their adoptions of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism, the gold standard definition of anti-Semitism that the vast majority of universities adopted. It's not enough to just adopt that definition. When we see anti-Semitism on campus, what it's proving is they're not implementing that definition of anti-Semitism. And so there's an opportunity for the board, alongside our colleagues and other organisations, to go much harder on the implementation of that code. In terms of the other organisations, we all work in different ways, and I really do appreciate some of the work that the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism does. They do things in a way that the Board of Deputies can't do it. And so we need to be coordinated with them, and we need to collaborate and work hand in glove with the Jewish Leadership Council, because so many of the JLC members are also members of the Board of Deputies. We all need to succeed, because when we all succeed, the community succeeds. And so that will be my approach.
Thank you. Finally, Michael.
So as some of you may know, I was the deputy chair at Leeds University. We had at Leeds and still have very good links there. So one of the things that for me is really important that our deputies should know, number one, the Vice Chancellor, number two, the Secretary, number three, the Provost, which in some of the universities, the Chancellor and the Secretary, and the head of the board as well. Knowing those people, those are the key people at universities. If we've got those links, then we are already ahead of the game in terms of making things happen at a university when we have problems. As far as the rest of the universities are concerned, there is the chaplaincy, UJS, Chabad, AISH, and other organisations all working at the universities. We've got to work with them and collaboratively with them to make sure that, again, our students are looked after, something that I have been used to and dealt with throughout all my life. Moving on to the CAA and other organisations, I have built, the CAA were able to read how the community felt in November. On November the 26th, they wanted the community out, the young people wanted the young to be out there demonstrating. There was a majority across the country. It was the day of my son's wedding. All his friends wanted to go on that march. I went on that march before the wedding, and there was some great pictures of me changing and looking like James Bond when I got to the wedding. But it was really important, and we need to build relations with the JLC and with CAA and work closely with them. And I believe I can do that as the president. So for me, I think it's a great question, Jerry, and thank you very much.
Right, and you've given Simon Rocker the headline, James Bond for president. Oh, he's gone. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I think we had a very good debate. Thank you for everyone's participation. So we come now to the closing statements. I've invited everyone to give a closing statement outlining their main arguments in just 60 seconds. We'll go in reverse order that we started with. So I start by inviting Phil to address us.
Well, first of all, thank you, Michael, for chairing so well. You're our great president of the US, and I think all of us would sleep easier if you were on the ballot in the other US presidential elections later this year. You've heard from us, now it's over to you. And I put to you 6 questions to help you make your mind up. The first is, who is going to be the best representative in this community on question time? Who's going to be best able to speak to the TikTok generation? In a community which sometimes struggles to attract younger people, who's going to be the best face for Jewish continuity? Who has the strongest connections across politics, the media, faith and diplomacy to make our case at the highest level? And who is going to be best able to represent us in all those spaces? I put it to you that the answer to all those questions is the same, and so I ask your vote on the 12th of May. Thank you, good evening, and most importantly, Israel Chai. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Michael. The board must lead and inspire confidence. More of the same is no longer an option. We need strong, experienced, and effective leadership. I am the serious leader for serious times. I ran a large business for over 30 years. As treasurer, I've taken the board from a serious monthly deficit to close to break even within 2 years. I've led Maccabi. I've been president of Western Marble Arch, chair of LFI, and vice chairman of UJIA. I chaired the Rapid Regeneration Company, and I served as deputy chair of the University of Leeds, and I'm currently vice chair of the Faith and Belief Forum. We must prioritise the challenges of Jew hatred and poverty. We must act immediately and act now, working together as a community. If we are divided, there is little we can do. If we are united, there's little we cannot do. Now is the time to elect me as your president. Thank you, all of you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Sheila?
Yeah.
I served for 6 years as Vice President, Senior Vice President, and deputised for the President on numerous occasions. I have the experience, the skills, the energy, and the passion to lead the board and regain our respect. I have 3 priorities: to shout louder than our enemies, to combat hate speech and conspiracy theories on TikTok and social media, and to educate about being Jewish and about Israel. I want to paraphrase from the great Rabbi Hillel to finish. If we are not for ourselves, who will be for us? If we are only for ourselves, what are we? If not now, when? Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, Bill Rosenberg. Oh, sorry, Amanda. Sorry.
I can't get it
Notes
right.
away. I mean, sorry.
And he called me, me. He said,
Sorry.
Yeah. I agree. It's been.
Thank you. Can you hear me? We need a board that is relevant and responsive to our community's needs and a source of pride and inspiration. As your Vice President of Defence, you've seen me fight the rising tide of hate and defend and protect our rights and traditions. I've been representing you and all British Jews for the last 6 years with government, civil society and the media. And I have the experience we need now more than ever to work with you to forge a stronger, more resilient community. As your next president, expect strong leadership rooted in service to the community. My promise to you is clear. I will stand strong, protect and unify our community in purpose. I will listen to and empower deputies and our community. And we will create a board that is the voice of British Jews, that serves as a beacon of hope, strength for generations to come. I'm asking for your vote to be the next Board of Deputies President, for a board that is unified, empowered and transformed. Together, let's build a brighter future for British Jews.
Sorry. Thank you all very much. I'm John Melker. I'm one of the central elected deputies for United Synagogue. I'm just going to say thank you. First of all, thank you to Michael for chairing this evening. Somebody suggested he could be the president of the US. At least you have 20 years to think about it before you reach the age that they have US presidents anyway. So that's some time. I want to thank Richard for setting the whole thing up. He does all the work in the background. And of course, Joe, as always, for your support and presence and words and everything you do. No, I'm not going to recommend a US presidential candidate. We are so lucky to have 4 excellent candidates who all have this, the background and the affiliation and the connection to the way that the US thinks. So I don't think we have an issue here that we're not going to be well represented on the board, whoever of these 4. And I don't think we have a problem also in terms of quality. We have 4 fantastic candidates. We could ask, why are they standing? I have no idea. I was actually asked by a few bewildered people to stand as vice president. And after serious consideration, I decided instead to stay married. But they're volunteered. And one thing I will urge about these 4 is, there's so many good qualities in terms of contacts, in terms of experience, in terms of enthusiasm. I thought that shone through tonight. I urge you to, whoever wins, make sure that the 3 others do not disappear from the scene. That would be such a waste. I think Michael talked about an advisory board, and most good companies have good advisory boards. All 4 of you needs to continue to be involved, and I urge whoever gets elected to ensure that that happens. There's a lot of similarities amongst you all. We obviously fight anti-Semitism. We obviously support Israel in any way we can. There's different strategies. There's different ways of doing things. There's different methods. There's different approaches. There's different leadership styles. We will see how that works out. But I think we are in a lucky position. Let me just mention also that there's a vice president elections coming up. I think there's only one of the candidates in the room, Adrian. So we have a couple of United Synagogue candidates, and then we have a candidate for treasurer in the room who actually will be elected. So Ben's sitting over there, but you're welcome to talk to Adrian and to Ben also about their policies because they will have a lot of influence. I think the challenge really for the president, and with that I will end tonight, is we have a unique organization on the Board of Deputies. There's no organization that has 300 elected members of a board. It's difficult to have that many, but it's also a strength. And the more we can get all of them involved and get them to help spread that message, and that's a responsibility of the deputies that are in this room. It is your responsibility. It's not just their responsibility. Every single deputy has that responsibility to spread the message. Then it becomes that unique organization that it really should be and is, and it will continue to do so. 300 elected deputies. It is a unique organization, in world jury, in fact. So I wish you luck, whoever gets the job. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for Miller for hosting us, and safe travels home.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.